This is Dennis McMahon, and welcome to Positively Vermont. And today we are going to explore a very beneficial organization called HomeShare Vermont. My guest is Rick Cengeri, who is the Outreach and Communication Specialist with HomeShare Vermont. Welcome, Rick.
Thanks so much for having me, Dennis. Great to be here.
Well, first of all, what I like to do on Positively Vermont is to have the guests tell us a little bit about yourself or a lot about yourself.
So I've been at HomeShare Vermont for about 2.5 years now, after a long time in radio. So I was last with WDEV as the host of Vermont Viewpoint. And then before that, with Vermont Public Radio, when it was called Vermont Public Radio, for 12 years. And most of that time spent as a producer on Vermont Edition. And then for people who can go back just a little bit farther, I was the morning show host at The Point for about 3 years. Mm-hmm. So I did some alternative radio is how I got into radio first, and then with VPR into news.
That's great.
And then here I at HomeShare Vermont, I am in charge of advertising and promotions and trying to find hosts and guests to apply to our program, which we'll talk about. I also go out and talk to churches, to service organizations, to social workers, to anyone who will listen to me about what we do at HomeShare Vermont. Yesterday, I drove to Shoreham and was at the First Congregational Church to talk to a group. Last week up at the Varnum Library in Jeffersonville. So I go far and wide to let people know about what HomeShare is all about.
That's great. Well, tell us how HomeShare, first of all, tell us what it is, and if you could give us a little bit of the history of the organization.
Yeah, so basically what home sharing is someone who has room in their home agrees to let someone live there for rent or help around the home or a combination of the two. We find the match. We find a person who's looking for an affordable place to live. And then we have a specific process that we use that we'll talk about to try to match people. The program has been around since 1982 here in Vermont. A few volunteers who were working with Cathedral Square heard about this idea. I know it was already in Europe 10 years before a program started out in the Bay Area of San Francisco. And they thought, boy, there's nothing more Vermont, and Vermont values than this idea of home sharing. And so they start the program very small here in Burlington. In a few years, they were able to get some funding from United Way, hire a director, and expand throughout Chittenden County. And now we're in 8 counties in the state. We're in the northwest corner here in Grand Isle, Franklin, Chittenden, and Addison. Right before the pandemic, a program that had been operating in central Vermont ceased to exist. And so the state asked us to take over Lamoille, Washington, and Orange counties. And then about 1.5 years ago, with additional funding from the state, we were able to expand into most of Windsor County, a few towns in the Northeast Kingdom, and a few towns in Rutland County.
I just want to digress for a second. Is there a housing? I know there's a housing shortage in a lot of places. What is is there a housing shortage in Vermont, and what's the extent of it?
Yeah, so I'm probably not the person to quote stats, but there is a housing shortage. There was before. We never had a massive stock of housing for people, and then we did get an influx, a real bump in population during the pandemic. And that really put a further strain on our housing stock. But as one of our guests wrote into us once, Vermont might not have enough homes, but we have enough bedrooms. And that's the concept of home sharing, of trying to find people who have room in their homes who would offer that for people who are looking for a place to live.
Yeah, I notice a lot of housing in Burlington will have these small, not even big enough to be an apartment, but they're big enough maybe to be a bedroom. I notice a lot of that in
Yep.
some of the properties, particularly the older parts of town. Uh,
Mhm.
well, let's go through the process. How are the matches made? You know, the matches made in heaven, or they're made in real estate, real estate personals, or how is that done?
Well, they are made by angels, our case managers and our staff volunteers, and it's really amazing to see the work they do. But I'll take you through the process from start to finish.
Excellent.
First of all, there's an application, and there's no fee to apply. We try to remove that barrier for people. There is a fee if a match is made, and it's based on income. It's on a sliding scale. And Dennis, we can set up a program for someone who's having problems paying that. We can even waive it if we need to, because the really important thing is to make the match. Once we get an application, what we do first is we do background and reference checks. So the safety of both host and guests is really important. And so it's why most people turn to HomeShare Vermont, is because we do very thorough background and reference checks. And when we do those, the next thing is a case manager will reach out and interview the applicant, find out what would be an ideal home share match. We try to create these compatible matches. We learn about their interests. We learn about what the rent will be, what help is needed. And then we try to find the individual who might be a good match. We have at any given time about 70 to 80 people who are offering their homes. We call them hosts, and about 70 to 80 people who are looking for housing. We call them guests. And we see if we might have some matches that would be possible. So let's say you applied as a host, I applied as a guest. Case managers think, boy, Dennis and Rick would be good together. They'd call you, tell you all about me, call me, tell me all about you, what they learned in the interview, in the application, in the reference checks, and in the background checks, and then see if we want to meet. And so the next step is an introduction between the two with the case manager there present to make sure that we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot of questions that our case manager will ask of each other. Dennis, we've had 43 years of coming up with questions, so we've got a lot of them. And then see how we get along. They'll check with us after the introduction. And if you'd like to move forward and I'd like to move forward, the next step is a 2-week trial. And so I move in for 2 weeks lightly. We say you move in with a suitcase, not a U-Haul, and we see how it goes between the two of us. And then if we are amenable, then the match begins. An agreement is written up that explains exactly what's expected of each other, what the rent will be, what help you might need around the home that I'll provide, how many hours a week that'll be, what your house rules will be. Can I have a pet? Can I smoke? Can I use cannabis? Can I bring guests over? Can they be overnight guests? Can they be overnight romantic guests? A lot of questions that people don't think to ask when they have someone come live with them. We try to do that up front and make sure that people understand that. And then for as long as the match goes on, Dennis, the case manager is available. So if for some reason I'm not keeping up my end of the bargain, I'm supposed to wash dishes every night, but I'm leaving them in the sink. If we have a conversation and it's not getting rectified, you can call a case manager and we can have a discussion and try to fix that. The match itself, there's no determined length of time. Most will last between a year and 5 years. They average about 2, but generally it's in effect a month-to-month agreement, because either of us could end it with a 30-day notice if for some reason we're not happy with it, or if circumstances change and one or the other would like to end the match.
Well, might be a little technical, but how does this differ from an apartment landlord-tenant relationship?
Yeah, well, for one, in a a landlord-tenant relationship, landlord's generally giving someone an apartment to live in, and maybe somebody finds a roommate to live with. Both are on the lease. In this case, you know, the home or the apartment or the condominium is the host's, and they're asking guests to come and stay with them for rent or help. Usually a landlord or a roommate is not asking for help. And so what happens is with this too, it's more affordable than an apartment. We have a maximum rent of $650. If someone asks for help, then usually, you know, the rent goes down as the help goes up, a maximum of about 12 hours a week in help. And so the average help that someone gets is about 7.5 hours a week. The average rent that our guests are paying right now is $360. Dennis, if you were out shopping for a one-bedroom apartment right now, the minimum you'd pay is at least 4 times that. And you'd have to have first, last, and security deposit. With home sharing, you're paying first month's rent. So again, the barriers are low for someone to move in and make that match.
Speaking of barriers, you know, there are quite a bit of housing opportunities that have a cap on what people make. And sometimes there are people who may make more than the public housing requirement, and they're kind of caught in the middle. So is there any maximum income situation like they have in public housing?
Yeah, we have no age or income requirements. So that's really not a concern for us, a maximum rent or a minimum rent. You know, there are apartments where because of what the rent is and the first, last, and security, they want there's a minimum salary that they're expecting of people. Or like you said, in some housing situations, there's a max salary or earnings. We don't have that. We want to help anyone who this would apply to. And, you know, again, most people think that the hosts, for instance, are only going to be people 65 and older. Our hosts range in age right now from 27 to 98. And it does skew higher. The average age is 72. Our guests, again, people think it's going to be very young, starts at 22. We have a guest as old as 81 right now. And the average age is in the late 40s. So we'll help people who are going through a life change, like a divorce, possibly. We've had grandparents who want to move to Vermont and be close to their children and grandchildren. And so this is a really affordable way for that to happen.
This, with any luck, is going to be going statewide. And what types of properties do you have? Just give us an idea of the geographical situation and the buildings. I noticed there's some buildings in Burlington almost are like apartments, but they're private homes. Can you give us a physical description of the varieties of properties that you
Yeah.
do?
So it ranges from like a 2-bedroom apartment or 2-bedroom condominium up to beautiful old farmhouses that have 3 or 4 extra bedrooms. Sometimes it's an ADU or in-laws apartment that someone might have in their home or adjacent to their home that they're able to offer. The basic requirement for someone to be a host is to offer a private room. It could be a shared or private bath, and then shared common areas. So most of the matches, Dennis, most of the guests are going to be individuals. When we do have those situations where someone can offer 2 bedrooms or an ADU, then we can possibly help house a couple or maybe a single parent with children.
How do you ensure that, let's say, in some cases, the people might not get along? How do you deal with that?
All right. Well, we can't ensure that they'll get along, but we really do that due diligence of trying to create matches that are compatible. Learning what your interests are, what my interests are, what your lifestyle is, what my lifestyle is. Going through that process of having us meet, having us do the 2-week trial, and even the ability to end it on the other end if it's not quite working out. So, it would be easy to say, Dennis is in Burlington, Rick's looking for a place in Burlington, Dennis is, offering at $500, Rick can pay that, let's put them together. But, if you're a night owl who listens to hard rock, till about midnight, and, I go to bed at 8 o'clock and listening to nothing but soft jazz, we might not be the best match, right? So that's a really important consideration. If I have a cat and you've got allergies, you're not going to say, yeah, bring them on in. Let's see how it works. So there's a lot of those types of, considerations that our case managers look at. Now, that makes the process methodical and purposeful. You can insert the word slow because it's a slow process. We're never going to rush it. We want to make sure people feel safe and they feel comfortable with the person that they're asking into their home, and vice versa, that I feel comfortable moving into your home. And so at lightning speed, Dennis, we're going to make a match in a month. Generally, it'll take 3 to 6 months. And we can never guarantee that when you apply or when I apply, we'll find the right match. Generally, hosts have a longer time where they can kind of wait for the right person. A lot of guests have maybe a deadline where I need to be out of an apartment by a certain time, or I've got a job starting and I need to make a match or find a place to live more quickly. And so we always do advise people when they apply that they should continue to look in as many places, continue to search for the answer elsewhere. And if you find someone to live with you, or if I find a place to live and it's not through HomeShare, it's not a problem. The important thing is that people are finding housing.
Well, you've mentioned the word case manager several times, and maybe you could
Yep.
describe who those people are, what do they do, and what experience they've had in the field.
Yeah, so the case managers are the people who work with our hosts and guests, interview them, get a sense of what would be a good match, and they meet together once a week and talk about who would be good matches. We also have staff volunteers who help us. We have 4 in Chittenden County. We have 4 in Addison County. They also meet with hosts and guests and try to create matches. Most have a background in social work. And so, that's where their interests and their experience lies. Some have interests in housing, and that's why they come to us. We have 3 staff volunteers who are they're retired high school guidance counselors.
Mm-hmm.
There's a skill, right, that really works for exactly what we're doing. So you got to really have empathy. You got to be a great listener, and then really care about housing and helping people find a match, for the guests, an affordable place to live, for the hosts, a way for them to stay in their home. Maybe that's because of the additional rent. Maybe it's for help around the home. I should mention one more thing, Dennis. I talk about rent, but a host can offer a place to live for no rent. 25% of our hosts charge no rent at all and are just asking for someone to be there to make sure they're all right, someone to help with some of the chores around the home, and to share a meal and to share some fun with. Our hosts and guests do have a lot of fun together too.
I can imagine. Well, how do you ensure that all the applicable county and city codes are enforced? Let's say someone, maybe an elderly couple has a space available. Maybe there are code considerations or other things that are overlays to this. Do you get involved with that at all?
We don't in that kind of granular detail.
Mhm.
That would be near impossible. But we do look for things like egress, right? We don't want to put anybody in a position where they wouldn't be safe. So there needs to be that fire safety, for instance. Make sure there's smoke alarms in the unit. But again, hosting guests will meet, excuse me, in an introduction with our case manager, and we'll get an opportunity then as well for the guests to see if this is a suitable place for them. What's really interesting is we do an annual survey, Dennis, to see how we're doing, and we get some really wonderful feedback from people about the very positive effects that home sharing has had on them. But we ask people, what would your situation be if you weren't home sharing? When we ask the guests this, and a lot of them say, I'd be homeless, I'd be couch surfing, or I would be living in substandard housing. And that's kind of scary to think about. It's probably something you and I have never really experienced, thank goodness. But a lot of Vermonters do. They have to take places that really shouldn't be, habitable by our fellow Vermonters. And so we want to make sure too that the places that are offered by our hosts are comfortable but also safe for our guests.
That's great. Well, one of the things we like to do on Positively Vermont is ask, what do you need? Do you need volunteers? Do you need contributions? Do you need invitations to community groups? Just tell our audience what you need and how they can help.
Yeah. So volunteers right now we're set, but we might need some in the future, maybe to help with our front desk. And we're here in South Burlington on Farrell Street, so not far from everyone who's watching this. Fundraising is always important. To remain sustainable is important. We get state funding. We apply for a lot of grants from foundations. We have wonderful donors, and we'd invite people to help in that regard. But if you don't have that kind of wherewithal, we do have a wonderful raffle going on right now, Dennis. We do this once a year, and tickets are $25 each. Someone could win one of 6 Vermont Inn stays. We also have some great experiences. You could be entered in the Vermont City Marathon. We've got a shopping spree in Montpelier. Some really wonderful things, dinners, theater tickets to the Flynn, for instance. So they can go to our website, which is homesharevermont.org, and learn more about that. But the other thing that's really important you mentioned is being invited to come out and talk to people. The most important thing, like you've offered today, is the opportunity to make sure everybody knows about this, that we can benefit anyone who could use HomeShare Vermont as a host or a guest. I will go anywhere at any time and talk to any amount of people to let them know about home sharing. So that's a really important element of what we do.
That's great. Tell us, do you have any plans for future expansion of your projects?
We do. So, we have this map, and not all the counties are filled in. And so our long-term goal has been to get to the entire state. And this year we are asking the legislature for additional funding so we can expand completely into the Northeast Kingdom, through the rest of Windsor County and all of Windham County. And in both those places, we hope to have an organization that will partner with us so that they'll share some of the expense. They'll have people who are on the ground already in those geographic areas, and they can serve as case managers in spreading the word and making matches, home share matches. We did this 2 years ago or a year and a half ago with the Thompson Center in Woodstock, and that's how we were able to expand to 16 towns in Windsor County, and we're making some wonderful matches there right now. And it's really had this great knock-on effect, Dennis, too, of energizing Orange County, which it abuts. And so Orange County was kind of always at the end of our geographic range. Now it's right in the middle of things and getting a lot of activity.
That's great. And I know you spoke about the state legislature. Do you have any other legislative initiatives, whether federally or other sources of funding? Are you working on any of that? And how can people support that? Even your initiatives with the legislature right now. So how can people support you in other efforts besides providing housing?
Absolutely. So, so most of our funding comes through Dale. The Department of Disability, Aging, and Independent Living, and some of that is passed through from the federal government. So, so far, that's safe, but one never quite knows. So if you've had experience with home sharing, if you've known someone who is home shared, it would be great to let your Congresswoman know, your U.S. senators, but most importantly, your state representatives and state senators. That's really going to be, where we need support this year to be able to expand, to be able to continue what we do. In a normal year, Dennis, we help just shy of 300 people in home share matches. And with the funding we get from the state, that is less than $2,000 a person that we're able to do this on from state funding. Now, if the state had to worry about these individuals as far as housing them or trying to find senior housing, which is in very short supply, it would cost an awful lot more than about $2,000 a year. So you can just imagine what the state funding is able to do through our organization.
Well, do you have any success stories that are available on your website? I'm sure you have plenty of anecdotes and plenty of success stories, and we wouldn't be able to go through all of them right now. But is there a place where people can look at recommendations or how this has helped?
Yeah, so on our webpage, they can find our newsletters and our annual reports. And we always have a story or two, a wonderful match story or two that's in there. I will tell you, I mentioned the word fun. We've got one wonderful match where the host, Shirley, is 98 years old. And her guest, Beth, hop in Shirley's VW Beetle every Monday night and go to bingo and play bingo together. When they're not playing bingo, they've got matching recliners. So after dinner, they watch Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune and reality shows. We've got a wonderful match going on in Heinsberg, and they're like mother and daughter, and they've taken dance classes together. They've gone dog obedience classes together, farmers markets, concerts. So what's happening is these friendships develop, right, that last a lifetime, long after the match ends. And really for a lot of people, it eliminates social isolation, which we really saw during the pandemic. I saw it with my own mom back in Pennsylvania, and it's pretty devastating. And to have another individual who is living in the home, who comes home every night, checks in on you, enjoys dinner with you, watches TV maybe, or we got another match who pop popcorn every Friday night, and that's movie night. The two of them make sure that they're there every Friday night watching a movie together, catching up on things. So You can read more of these stories, though, on our website, homesharevermont.org.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you, Rick. And hopefully we'll be hearing some progress in the future when we get an opportunity to have you on Positively Vermont and in the future. And thank you very much.
Sure. And if people have need for an application, have questions about their situation, they want to learn more, 802-863-5625 is our number.
Excellent. Thank you. This has been Dennis McMahon. My guest has been Rick Cengeri from HomeShare Vermont. Thank you for watching.